Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I have 5 cards to share with you featuring the July Hero Arts My Monthly Hero Kit. Here's a quick overview of the contents of this kit. You get the 6x8 clear stamp set with 9 coordinating frame dies, and 1 fancy edge die is included in that kit. You'll also get two of each of the colors of the sticker paper. There's also 5 reactive ink cubes in Blue Hawaii, Splash, Pool Party, Key Lime Fizz, and Taffy. And finally, you'll get an embossing powder in the color Coral. I also got one of the add-on stamp sets, and I did get the underwater pillar window die, which unfortunately I didn't find until a little bit later, so I'll show that in just a little bit. Anyway, jumping right into card number 1, I'm starting with the stamping of the bottom of the ocean using the first layer, or the most solid. I am using the Blue Hawaii ink cube from the kit to stamp the first layer down onto a piece of Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock. I'll go ahead and line up the second layer, and I'm using VersaFine ink. I'll ink that stamp and stamp that down. Once I have that second layer on, I'm going to add clear embossing powder across the entire panel. And I was honestly surprised that the first layer still was a little bit wet. But anyway, I go ahead and add my clear embossing powder, and then I heat set that in place with my heat gun. And then finally, I'm going to line up the third layer of this layering stamp set. And I'll go ahead and stamp that down using VersaMark ink and heat set that in place with white embossing powder. Now honestly, I should have used some different color, but the white was just kind of getting lost. However, the vision I had for this card was kind of a sort of a monochromatic look. So I didn't want to bring in too many colors, I just wanted to add in some of the neutrals. I'm also going to use that same Blue Hawaii ink on some of the images from the main kit, and then heat set those in place with clear embossing powder as well. Once I have all of my elements stamped and embossed, I'll be using the coordinating die cuts to cut those out, and then I can set all of that aside and work on the background panel. So again, I'm kind of going for a monochromatic look with this card, and I was trying to match the stamping with a slightly different shade than what I've used for that. So I have a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm ink blending Mermaid Lagoon across most of the entire panel. I am leaving a little bit of white on top to just create kind of a fade out, and then I can come in with some black soot at the bottom of the panel and ink blend that just to create a little bit of depth. And then I come back over the area where the two colors meet, and I just try to blend out that harsh line. Although that will be covered up, so I'm not too worried about it. Once I'm done with the ink blending, I'll go ahead and spray my panel down and then blot that up with a clean paper towel to create some texture. Here I have some diluted black acrylic paint, and I'm just using a paintbrush to create some splatter marks, as well as white acrylic paint that I've diluted with water. So I did leave this panel aside to air dry, and then I can go ahead and do my sentiment stamping. The sentiment I picked out for this card reads, "Sending you oceans of love," and I've stamped it out using Versamark ink and then heat set that in place with white embossing powder. Next, I'm going to start arranging all of my elements on the card front. I have the bottom of that ocean die cut that I've popped up on foam tape, and I've added it to the bottom of my panel. And then I can start adding in all of the smaller elements to finish off this card. For my second card, I'm going to be ink blending. As a matter of fact, I ink blend on all of the cards. Anyway, I was really excited to get the reactive inks in this kit. The samples I've seen from various artists or the Hero Arts design team when they use this ink is just phenomenal. So I've inked up a portion of that panel with Splash Reactive ink, and then I come in with Taffy Reactive ink and blend that out across the other half of the panel. And then I just start to blend across where the two inks meet to get a nice shade of purple. I do go ahead and continue to blend that down a little bit further to get more of that purple for this card, and then I did splatter a little bit of water, blotted it dry to create some texture. I've used an oval die to die cut an opening in the heavyweight cardstock because I'm creating a shaker card. I've also die cut another panel using the fancy edge die from the kit. And here I'm adding my acetate with double-sided adhesive, and then I can start adding in my foam strips to create the shaker wall. I do go ahead and add the foam adhesive on the inner portion of the frame just to keep the sequins contained somewhat in where it would be visible. And I do double up on my foam tape, although in hindsight I should have just left it as one layer. I'm attaching the fancy edge frame to the inside of the panel using some liquid adhesive. And then I could just add in a couple of the smaller images as well as my sentiment. And here I've just kind of planned out where they're gonna go. I'll grab my Misty to help me stamp that down. I am using Versamark ink, and then I'll stamp all three of those down at the same time and add my white embossing powder, then heat set that in place with my heat gun. At this point, I'm ready to start putting my card together. I'm adding in all of the sequins to the center of that panel, and then I can remove the backing of the foam tape and place that top panel down. And this card is basically complete. I just add this finished panel to a top folding A2 sized card base. For the third card, I'm going to be making a Slimline underwater scene card. I've used the Trinity Stamps Slimline stitched card dies to die cut one of the largest of the panels from Bristol Smooth cardstock. And I've just started ink blending this entire panel with tumbled glass distress oxide ink. And then I've went ahead and added some of that ink onto my glass mat and added water to do some ink smushing. And I'll just continue layering several more shades to that background by ink smushing. And this time I am using a piece of packaging plastic. It's just a little bit easier to work with than onto my glass mat. I started with peacock feathers, and then I've added Mermaid Lagoon, and I'll finish everything off with blueprint sketch. And after each of the color that I add, I do go ahead and heat set the panel just a little bit so that I don't get too much of that color to mix with each other. So after I finished adding all of the colors, I do set this panel aside to completely air dry before working with it again. In the meantime, I'll start creating the rest of the elements for this card. I'm using the layering stamp from the kit, and this time I've grabbed my Distress Oxide inks to stamp those out. I'm going for a sandy color bottom with Antique Linen Distress Oxide, and then I come in and add just a little bit of Vintage Photo to the bottom of that and blend out with the finger dauber before stamping it down. For the second layer, I'm using VersaFine ink to stamp that out. And then finally for my third layer, I've stamped it out with VersaMark ink and added the coral embossing powder to heat set that in place. So I decided that I wanted the bottom of the ocean to be a little bit darker, so I'm just coming in with a little bit of blueprint sketch, and then I'll do some more ink smushing on top of that panel just to keep the look uniform of this card. I also did die cut a piece of black cardstock with that fancy edge die, and I used the coordinating frame cuts for the stamped image. I've already trimmed the die cuts to fit the Slimline panel, and I can start adhering the rest of the elements to my card. But before I do that, I'm stamping out a couple of the images of the little fish from the main kit. I've just added it to my acrylic block, and then I went ahead and stamped those down directly to the panel. And then here I'm just a little bit fussing with what I want to do, and I do decide I want another little fish. And then I can start adhering the rest of the elements. I have the black piece adhered directly down with liquid adhesive, and I have the bottom of the ocean popped up on foam tape, and I've pressed that in place. I do finish this card off by adding some glossy accents to the top of that three little fish. And then I add a few of the Studio Katia clear drops to finish off this card. So for card number 4, which I think is my favorite for just the ink blending, I am using regular distress inks. I feel like they're more of a vibrant look to them, and I wanted quite a vibrant background on this card. I've picked out a bunch of colors to create an underwater look, and I'm starting with black soot on the edges, and then I'm coming in with blueprint sketch across where I've just added black soot, except I'm taking that color just a little bit further up. My next color that I'm adding is Wilted Violet, and again I'm just going over where the two colors meet, and I'm taking that color halfway up the panel. Then I've added Mermaid Lagoon and Peacock Feathers, and then I do finish everything off with cracked pistachio distress ink. In the interest of time, I'm editing a lot of the repetitive steps out, but just know that I go back and forth between each color and the next and blend where they overlap until I get a relatively smooth look. And then as I was digging through one of my boxes of stuff for something else, I came across the underwater pillar window die that I did purchase with my kit, so I thought it was about time I used it. I did add that die to the top of that ink blended panel, and I die cut the center out. And here I'm just stamping out the jellyfish from the Nita hand stamp set onto black cardstock, and I've heat set that in place with white embossing powder. I'm just taking a white color pencil and shading the image white. I think it's a stunning contrast between the shading and the black cardstock. And it doesn't take anything away from the ink blending, which again is my favorite part of this card. I'll add the panel down to a white side folding card base and then add my ink blended panel on top using some foam tape. And that will finish off card number 4. And finally we are on the last card, card number 5. I'm starting with a piece of Hero Hue Paradise cardstock. I have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 half panel on my work surface area, and I'm just ink blending with Mermaid Lagoon. Right on top of that panel, I'm just adding this ink randomly with my blender brush. And since I am using one blender brush for all of the colors, I'm just cleaning it in between onto a piece of towel. I've added peacock feathers right next to that first blend, and then I've brought in Stormy Sky, and I'm adding that in just a couple of the corners. It is quite a darker shade than what I've already added, but I will just continue ink blending and trying to get those colors to blend as seamlessly as possible. So once I have the panel all blended, I've grabbed the Waves and Clouds Bold Prints stamp, and I'm inking that up with Sea Salt Reactive ink. I'll press the panel down directly onto my stamp and then rub it with my fingers to transfer the ink. And this just leaves a nice subtle impression of that background stamp. I've colored in the images off screen with my Copic markers, but if you are interested in the combination that I used, I will have a coordinating blog post link down below, so check that out. I've stamped the sentiment and embossed it with black embossing powder, and then I'm starting to adhere all of my elements down to my card front. I've added the seagrass using liquid adhesive, and then I've popped up my 2 characters up with foam adhesive before adding them to my panel. And just a couple of little embellishments. I'm adding the Studio Katia clear drops, and then I will also add some glitter to all of the stamped images with a Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen. So that will complete all of my cards using the July Hero Arts My Monthly Hero card kit. So here's a look at all of the cards I made using this kit. At the time of this voiceover, there are some kits available, so if you are interested in that, I will have it linked down below. As always, I appreciate your comments and the likes you leave on my videos. It lets me know that you enjoy my content. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit the notification bell to be notified the next time I upload a new video. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching, and I will see you next time.